At my sister's wedding, she mocked me in front of everyone. Assistants like you aren't part of our world. But when the CEO stood up and said, actually, she's my boss, the whole room went silent, and my sister's arrogance vanished in seconds. I still remember that day like it was yesterday, though it's been almost 8 months now. I'm Emma Thompson, the last successful sister. At least that's how my family saw me, until that wedding day changed everything. Growing up, Megan and I were always this weird competition nobody announced, but everyone played. She was the gorgeous one with perfect grades and an Ivy League future. I was, well, the other one. The one who picked a state college, who didn't bring home trophies or date the quarterback. Our parents never came right out and picked favorites, but you could see it in how they'd practically glow describing Megan's latest achievement, while my stuff got those polite little nods, you know the ones. After college, Megan landed this fancy position at some top financial firm in Boston, while I started as an executive assistant at Davidson Enterprises, this growing tech company. Just an assistant, my mom would say with that smile. You know, the one that says bless your heart without the words. What they didn't get was I was learning the business from the ground up, watching everything, soaking it all in. Rick Davidson, the CEO, kind of took me under his wing, though I kept that quiet around family. They wouldn't have gotten it anyway. I'd been dodging family get-togethers for like a year when the wedding invitations showed up. Not because I didn't love them, I do, in that complicated way you love people who drive you nuts, but because I was tired of feeling like I needed to apologize for my life. If only I'd known what was waiting for me at that reception hall. The invitation arrived in March, this thick, cream envelope with gold embossing that practically screamed expensive before I even touched it. Inside was a note from Megan. Hope you can make it, Em. It would mean a lot to have you there. Those words threw me. A weird moment of actual sisterly stuff from someone who'd spent years treating me like an inconvenient footnote in her perfect life story. I sat on my bed staring at that invitation forever. Part of me wanted to just check no and avoid the whole mess, the comparisons, the looks, the awkward conversations. But another part, the part that remembered building blanket forts with Megan before she got all superior, knew I had to go. The next few weeks were this blur of anxiety and my poor credit card taking a beating. I needed something to wear that wouldn't scream poor relation, but my budget was tight as hell. I finally found this navy blue dress at a consignment shop that looked way more expensive than it was. The lady who owned the place even threw in these silver earrings that matched perfectly. A small kindness that almost made me tear up right there. Every night I'd practice conversations in my head. Yes, still at Davidson. No, still not married. Yes, so happy for Megan. I practiced my smile in the mirror until it looked almost real. My friend Olivia kept saying I was overthinking everything, but she didn't get what it was like being the Thompson family disappointment. 2 days before the wedding, Rick called me into his office out of nowhere. I figured it was about this contract I'd been working on, but instead, he gave me this wrapped box. For the wedding, he said. And Emma, try to enjoy yourself. You've earned a break. I didn't open it till I got home. Inside was this delicate silver bracelet with a note. Remember who you are. I wore it under my sleeve the whole wedding weekend, like my secret armor against all the judgment I knew was coming. The Plaza Hotel in downtown Boston looked like something out of a damn fairy tale that Saturday. These massive flower arrangements were everywhere, and there was a legit red carpet from the curb to the doors. When my Uber pulled up, I seriously thought about asking the driver to just keep going. Maybe head for the airport instead. Name? Asked this guy with one of those clear earpieces, standing there with an iPad. When I told him, he actually looked me up and down before checking his list. Thompson, family's in the Hawthorne Suite, 6th floor. The way he said it made it super clear he didn't think I belonged. The elevator was all mirrors, so I had to stare at myself the whole way up. Hair done, makeup good, dress looking fine, but somehow I still felt like the before picture in some makeover show. When the doors opened, this wall of sound hit me. Laughter, glasses clinking, that confident chatter from people who've never had to check their account balance before making a purchase. Mom spotted me first, rushing over in this cloud of expensive perfume and those fake air kisses. Emma, you made it. We were starting to wonder. She held me at arm's length, looking me over like I was a science project. The dress is interesting. Come, your father's over by the windows. Dad gave me a real hug at least, his eyes crinkling at the corners like they always did. There's my girl, he said, and for a second I felt okay. Then he asked about my secretarial job, and the moment died. I corrected him. Executive assistant, but he'd already turned to greet someone who apparently mattered more. I took a deep breath and headed to the bridal suite. 2 bridesmaids I didn't know blocked the doorway, giving me these twin looks of who invited you. I just said family, and they moved aside, looking doubtful. Inside, Megan was surrounded by this small army: makeup artist, hairstylist, photographer, and 3 more bridesmaids, all tall, all gorgeous, all looking like they fell out of a magazine. When Megan caught my eye in the mirror, she froze for just a split second, before her face did this thing where it smiled without her eyes joining in. "Emma, you came!" She stood up, being careful not to mess up her hair, and gave me the lightest hug ever. "Don't you just love this venue? Jason's parents insisted. Apparently they've been members here forever." I caught the emphasis on members, her little reminder that this was a world I wasn't part of. I swallowed hard and handed her the small gift I'd brought, this vintage handkerchief that used to be our grandmother's. "Something old," I said. She opened it, nodded quickly, and handed it to one of her bridesmaids without a word. Cool. The ceremony was breathtaking, I'll give them that. The hotel's ballroom had been transformed into something straight out of some European cathedral. These massive arrangements of white roses and orchids created an aisle between rows of gold chairs. A string quartet played while guests found their seats, the music bouncing off the fancy ceiling way above us. I slid into a seat near the back, nodding at cousins who gave me those "do I know you" smiles. Across the aisle, Jason's family took up nearly 3 rows, all perfect hair, perfect clothes, radiating that special kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. They just had it. That ease of never worrying if your card will be declined. The music changed and everyone stood. Jason appeared at the altar with his 5 groomsmen in matching tuxes. He looked nervous but happy, shifting around as he waited. Then came the bridesmaids, floating down the aisle in identical champagne-colored dresses that probably cost more than my rent. And then Megan appeared on Dad's arm. And yeah, she looked amazing. Her dress was simple but elegant, fitting perfectly before flowing out into a modest train. Dad was beaming so much I thought his face might crack. I felt this weird mix of pride and something else. Not jealousy exactly, just this ache for something I couldn't quite name. Their vows were custom written, of course. Jason went first, talking about their perfect partnership and how they complemented each other's ambitions. Megan talked about finding her perfect match and building their perfect life together. Everyone made those little sighing sounds at all the right moments. I caught myself wondering if they actually believed all that stuff, or if it was just part of the show. And they were pronounced husband and wife. Everyone erupted in applause. I clapped until my hands hurt, watching them kiss and practically float back down the aisle. For just a tiny moment, I wondered what it would be like to have that kind of certainty, that belonging. Then I remembered I had to get through the reception alone, and my stomach did that familiar anxiety twist. As everyone filed out, I hung back, checking my phone. There was a text from Rick. "Hope the wedding's going well. Big news waiting for you on Monday." I smiled to myself, grateful for the reminder that I had something to go back to, somewhere I actually mattered. The reception hall made the ceremony space look plain. These crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen rain, catching light and scattering it across tables covered in what had to be real silk. The centerpieces must have cost a fortune, these towering arrangements of flowers I couldn't even name. I checked the seating chart with growing dread, finally finding my name at table 19, the absolute farthest from the head table, naturally. I made my way over, dodging waiters with trays of fancy appetizers. My table mates were Aunt Marie, who's been hard of hearing since forever, Uncle Phil, who I'm pretty sure thought I was some other relative's kid, and 3 elderly people from Jason's side who kept whispering and looking at me like I was some puzzle they couldn't figure out. "So you're Megan's sister," one of Jason's aunts finally asked, sounding like she couldn't quite believe it. How interesting. And what is it you do again, dear? I took a big gulp of water before answering. I work at Davidson Enterprises in tech. Oh, like IT? Computers and such? She seemed relieved to have put me in a box she understood. Something like that, I mumbled, not having the energy to explain that my job was actually pretty complex. What was the point? In their world, if you weren't a doctor, lawyer, or married to one, you might as well be invisible. During the salad course, I caught bits of conversation from the table behind me. That's her sister, apparently. The one who's some kind of secretary? Megan says she had potential, but no ambition. Such a shame when that happens in families. Stabbed a piece of lettuce way harder than necessary, pretending it was my sister's perfect face. The worst part was, Megan probably believed what she'd said. In her mind, I had settled, chosen an easy path. She had zero idea what I actually did, the projects I managed, the deals I helped close. She'd never bothered to ask. As I pushed food around my plate, I watched the head table. Megan and Jason sat in the middle, surrounded by their wedding party, all laughing at some inside joke. They looked like an ad for perfect lives. Beautiful, successful, certain. For a second, just a flash, I hated her. Then I felt guilty for hating her on her wedding day. Then I hated myself for feeling guilty. It was exhausting, this emotional ping pong I'd been playing my whole life. I made up some excuse to escape to the bathroom, needing a break from the weighted looks and polite questions that felt like tiny cuts. Walking across the room, I could feel eyes following me, measuring me against Megan, and finding me lacking. In the bathroom mirror, I straightened my shoulders and touched Rick's bracelet for luck. Just get through dinner, I whispered to myself. Then you can bail. I should have known better than to relax. The DJ announced it was time for toasts, and I settled back in my chair, grateful for any distraction from Table 19's awkward silence. Jason's best man went first, with the usual jokes about college days and bachelor party stories cleaned up for family ears. Then Jason's father gave this heartfelt speech about welcoming Megan to their family. When Megan stood up, champagne glass in hand, I expected the usual thank yous to guests, maybe some cute story about meeting Jason. What I didn't expect was for her to lock eyes with me from across the room. I want to give a special thanks to my sister Emma for being here today, she said, her voice carrying through the speakers. A spotlight suddenly found me, and my face burned as every head in the place turned to look. Emma and I have taken very different paths in life. Something in her tone made my stomach drop. I recognized that voice. It was the same one she used in high school, right before destroying someone with a fake compliment. While I've been building my career and relationship with Jason, Emma has been finding herself. Light laughter rippled through the crowd. But that's what makes family special, isn't it? We support each other no matter what choices we make. She took a sip of champagne, and I prayed she was done. She wasn't. Emma's always been the cautious one. While I took risks, she preferred security. While I aimed high, she found her comfort zone. Another pause, another fake smile. And that's okay. We can't all be ambitious. Someone has to answer the phones, right? More laughter, louder this time. I felt my face burning, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. So here's to different paths, Megan continued, raising her glass higher. Even assistants like you aren't part of our world, Em, but I'm glad you could get a glimpse of it today. The room went quiet for just a bit too long. People suddenly super interested in their dessert or the flowers. I wanted to disappear. Uncle Phil patted my hand awkwardly. One of Jason's aunts whispered something that made them both look at me with pity. I grabbed my purse, ready to make a quiet exit. I'd text congrats later. Blame a headache. No one would question it. No one would probably even notice I was gone. That's when the ballroom doors opened and Rick Davidson walked in. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. What would my boss, the CEO of a major tech company, be doing at my sister's wedding? But there he was, in this perfect charcoal suit, looking a little out of place as he scanned the room. When he spotted me, his face broke into a huge smile. He walked across the room with that confident stride that used to intimidate me when I first started working for him. Now it was weirdly comforting. People turned to stare as he passed, whispering to each other. "Emma," he called out, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "There you are. Sorry I'm late." Before I could process what was happening, he'd reached table 19 and pulled me into a warm hug. "Traffic from the airport was brutal," he explained, like we'd planned this all along. I stood there, frozen, mouth open, completely speechless. Rick either didn't notice my confusion or ignored it, turning to introduce himself to my table mates like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Richard Davidson," he said, shaking hands with Uncle Phil. "CEO of Davidson Enterprises. Emma's told me so much about all of you." The change at our table was instant. Jason's elderly relatives sat up straighter. Aunt Marie suddenly had no trouble hearing. Uncle Phil was practically falling over himself to talk to Rick. I could see Megan at the head table, her perfect smile slipping as she watched. She leaned over to whisper something to Jason, who was also staring our way, looking confused. "I didn't know you were coming," I finally managed to say quietly to Rick, while the others were distracted by a waiter. Rick winked at me. "Didn't want to miss this. Plus, I have news that couldn't wait till Monday." He glanced around at the fancy room. "Quite the party your sister's having. Mind if I say hello to the happy couple?" Before I could warn him, about what I wasn't even sure, Rick was guiding me toward the head table, his hand on my back. I could feel people watching us, could almost hear the questions in their minds. Who was this important-looking guy? Why was he with Emma, of all people? Megan's face was this amazing mix of irritation, curiosity, and something that looked almost like fear. Jason stood up, playing the good host, and held out his hand. "Hello there," he said. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Jason Miller." "Richard Davidson," Rick replied, shaking Jason's hand firmly. "I came to support Emma. Hope you don't mind me crashing." I watched as it clicked for Jason. "Davidson? As in Davidson Enterprises?" He looked at me differently now. "You work for him?" Rick laughed, real and warm, as he put his hand on my shoulder. "Work with her is more accurate these days." The DJ had just announced the cake cutting when Rick asked the wedding coordinator if he could make a quick toast. The woman looked uncertain until Rick mentioned his name again, and suddenly she was all smiles, rushing to get him a microphone. The magic of being a recognizable CEO, doors just opened. Rick stepped to the middle of the dance floor, champagne in hand. The spotlight that had exposed my humiliation earlier now shone on him, and he looked totally at ease in it. The room got quiet, everyone curious about this unexpected guest. "For those who don't know me, I'm Richard Davidson, CEO of Davidson Enterprises," he began, sounding warm and confident. "I wasn't on the original guest list, but I couldn't miss celebrating with Emma and her family today." He raised a glass toward Megan and Jason. "First, congratulations to the beautiful couple. May your partnership bring you as much success and happiness as I've been lucky to find in my business partnerships." Megan's smile looked stuck on her face. Jason nodded, though he seemed confused about where this was going. "I also want to share some news," Rick continued. "News that Emma's been too modest to announce herself." He turned to look right at me, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. As many of you know, Emma joined Davidson Enterprises 5 years ago as my executive assistant. What you may not know is how quickly she became essential not just to me, but to our entire operation. The room was dead silent. I could feel every eye on me, including Megan's increasingly bewildered stare. Last year, Emma headed our expansion into Europe, single-handedly saving a deal worth millions when negotiations almost fell apart. She's restructured our entire operations department, making us 30% more efficient. And just last month, she closed the Henderson acquisition that made headlines. Rick turned to face me directly, looking serious but proud. "Emma, I plan to save this for Monday's board meeting, but no reason to wait. I'm happy to announce that the board has unanimously approved your promotion to Chief Operating Officer of Davidson Enterprises, effective immediately. A collective gasp went through the room. Someone at a nearby table actually dropped a fork, the clatter breaking the stunned silence. "So you see," Rick continued, his voice carrying clearly, "when Megan mentioned that Emma answers phones, well, that's not quite right." He smiled, but there was steel behind it. "Actually, she's my boss now, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it." He raised his glass higher. "To Emma Thompson, one of the most brilliant business minds I've ever had the privilege of working with, and to Megan and Jason, may your marriage be as successful as your sister's career." The silence that followed was deafening. For 5 long seconds, nobody moved or spoke. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the room, hesitant at first, then enthusiastic. Like everyone was trying to prove they'd been on my side all along. The rest of the night was like some weird dream. People who'd ignored me earlier now couldn't wait to meet me. Business cards appeared from nowhere, slipped into my hand with whispered invitations to do lunch sometime. Uncle Phil suddenly remembered all these stories about how smart I was as a kid. One of Jason's aunts claimed she'd always seen something special in me. Megan stayed at the head table, her smile frozen in place, occasionally glancing my way with an expression I couldn't read. Anger? Embarrassment? Probably both. Jason, to his credit, seemed genuinely impressed, congratulating me when he got the chance, and asking real questions about my work. "I had no idea," he said quietly, during a moment when we found ourselves at the bar together. "Megan always described your job as, well, something different." I shrugged, feeling weirdly calm now that the worst was over. Megan sees what she wants to see, always has. He nodded slowly, looking back at his new wife with an expression that made me wonder if he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "Congratulations on the promotion," he said finally, raising his glass to me before heading back to the head table. Rick stayed for another hour, charming everyone he talked to, but careful to keep redirecting attention back to the wedding couple when appropriate. He was good that way, knew when to take center stage and when to back off. "You didn't have to do that," I told him when we found a quiet moment. "Do what? Tell the truth?" He smiled, eyes crinkling. "The board made their decision last week. I was going to tell you Monday with a proper celebration, but when I heard your sister's speech..." He shook his head. "Some things shouldn't wait." As the night wound down, Megan finally came over to me. She'd had enough champagne that her perfect posture had relaxed a bit, her practiced smile replaced by something more uncertain. "So," she said, twisting her new wedding ring nervously, "that's wow." "Yeah," I replied, not feeling particularly like making this easy for her. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" There was real confusion in her voice, maybe even a little hurt. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the anger I'd been carrying start to fade. "Would you have believed me if I had?" She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. After a moment, she tried again. "I'm sorry about my toast. It wasn't kind, true, sisterly," I suggested. She winced. "Any of the above?" We stood in awkward silence for a bit before I finally said, "It's your wedding day. Let's not ruin it with a fight. We can talk next week if you want." Relief washed over her face. She nodded quickly and gave me a brief, awkward hug before being called away for one last photo with her bridesmaids. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was in my new corner office going through quarterly reports when my assistant, yes, I have one now, buzzed to say my sister was here. I'd been expecting this visit, had been both dreading and looking forward to it. Megan looked different than at the wedding, less polished somehow, in jeans and a simple blouse instead of her usual power outfit. She hovered in the doorway, taking in the view of downtown Boston from my windows, the modern furniture, the framed article from Business Insider that had me as one of 30 under 30 to watch. "This is impressive," she said finally, stepping inside. "Thanks," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. How was the honeymoon? Bali was beautiful. She sat down, putting her purse beside her, though I spent half of it wondering if my new husband thinks I'm a terrible person. I couldn't help but smile a little. And does he? She sighed. He says no, but he's definitely seen a side of me he didn't know existed. She looked down at her hands. The side you've always known. That admission hung between us, more powerful than any apology. I brought you something, she said finally, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small box. Inside was the vintage handkerchief I'd given her for the wedding. I should have appreciated this more. It was thoughtful. I was just caught up in everything. Caught up in being Megan the Perfect, I said, but without the old bitterness. She gave a small laugh. Yeah, turns out perfect is exhausting. She looked around my office again. All these years I thought I was ahead of you. I never even bothered to ask what you were actually doing. I leaned back in my chair, feeling weirdly light. To be fair, I never corrected anyone. It was easier sometimes, letting you all think what you wanted. Why? She seemed genuinely confused. Thought about it. Maybe I needed to prove it to myself first. Maybe I didn't want to deal with the questions, the doubts. Or maybe I just got tired of trying to be seen in this family. She flinched slightly, but nodded. For what it's worth, everyone sees you now. Mom hasn't stopped telling her friends about her daughter, the COO, since the wedding. We both laughed at that, and something old and tight inside me started to loosen. We went to lunch afterward, and for the first time maybe ever, we just talked. Like actual sisters, not competitors. She told me about her honeymoon, her work challenges, her fears about marriage. I told her about my new role, the projects I cared about, my plans for the company. Walking back to my office, she asked the question I could tell had been bugging her all day. Aren't you mad at me? For all of it. Not just the wedding, but everything? I thought about Rick's words at the wedding, about the faces of those relatives who dismissed me for years, about that sweet moment of vindication. Let's just say that success is the best comeback to people who doubt you, even when those people are family. She nodded slowly, getting it. I won't doubt you again, Em. I promise. I believed her, not because people change completely overnight. They don't. But because sometimes all it takes is one moment to see someone for who they really are. For Megan, that moment happened when the CEO stood up and said, actually, she's my boss. And in that moment, her perfect little world shifted, just enough to make room for a different version of her sister, and maybe a different version of herself, too.